The metal walls of station shook again. Captain held onto the edge of the control console as the station rocked from another explosion far above. Through the thick viewport, he could see the orange light of fire spreading across the upper levels. 5,000 people. That was how many colonists depended on him to keep them alive. 5,000 lives that now hung on decisions made in the next few hours. The colony had been peaceful until 3 weeks ago. The people who lived here came from Earth to build something new, to establish a foothold on the edge of known space where resources were plentiful and the future seemed full of promise. The scientists studied the mineral deposits. The engineers built processing facilities. The families planted gardens and built homes and made plans for the generations that would come after them. Everything was normal. Everything was safe. Then the ships arrived. No one had seen them coming. The early warning systems that were supposed to catch approaching vessels had detected nothing. One moment the sensors showed empty space, and the next moment they showed fire. They came in waves, their crystalline bodies gleaming with colors that hurt to look at directly. Their ships were massive and strange, shaped like broken diamonds and jagged teeth. They did not send any message. They did not offer any chance to surrender. They simply began destroying everything. The first settlement was gone in hours. The mining facility in the north was nothing but rubble now. The agricultural domes where families had worked together to grow food were ruins. Over 2,000 colonists had died in those first 24 hours. Some of them had time to hide in bunkers. Others did not. Had watched the surveillance feeds as they moved through the settlements, destroying buildings and structures with methodical precision. He had seen people running, and he had seen them disappear in flashes of bright light. After a while, he stopped watching. Now the remaining colonists were gathered deep underground, below 20 levels of rock and steel. The bunkers had been designed for emergency shelter, but no one had really expected them to be needed. The plan had always been that Earth would protect them. Earth had the military. Earth had the power. If anything happened, Earth would send help. The communications officer came up beside him. Her name was, and she had been at station for 3 years. She had family down in the bunkers, 2 children and a husband who worked as a mechanic in the power plant. She held out a report in her shaking hands. "We sent the distress signal out again," said. "Full power broadcast on all human channels. We made sure it would reach Earth." Took the report and read through it. The message had gone out clear and strong. It contained everything they knew about the fleet: numbers of ships, types of weapons, speed and direction of approach, the population of the colony, the resource deposits that they seemed interested in, everything that Earth would need to understand the situation and decide what to do. "How long until they reach the outer bunker levels?" asked. Looked at her instruments. "Maybe 6 hours. The shields around the upper sections are failing. They are pushing through with ground troops now." 6 hours. It would take at least 48 hours for the fastest ship from Earth to reach them through the jump gates. Even if a ship left right now, even if Earth had military forces ready to move immediately, the timing would be close. Too close. They would break through the outer shields long before help arrived. Made a decision. He told to gather all the non-essential personnel. Anyone not needed to maintain life support systems, power generation, or communications had to go down to the deepest bunker levels. Everyone had to move to the most protected areas. Maybe the thick rock and reinforced steel could hold long enough. Maybe, if they were lucky, they would decide that breaking through was too much effort and would move on to other targets. He did not believe that. No one who had seen what they did to the settlements believed that. The next 2 hours were chaos. Colonists moved through the corridors like ghosts. Some of them cried quietly. Others moved in silence, too shocked to feel anything. Saw a woman carry 2 small children toward the stairs that led down to the bunker. She had the face of someone who had already decided she would not survive this. He wanted to tell her that everything would be okay. He wanted to tell her that Earth would send help. But he had learned long ago that lying to people was a kind of cruelty. Went to the communications room and made a personal broadcast. He spoke to all the colonists gathered in the bunkers. He told them to stay calm. He told them that Earth would hear their message. He told them that humanity did not abandon its own people. He could hear how hollow the words sounded. He said them anyway, because sometimes the hollow comfort was the only comfort there was. 4 hours after the ground troops reached the outer sections, the first bunker door started showing cracks. They were using some kind of cutting tool that burned through the reinforced metal like water. Watched from the main control room as the door began to glow red and then white. In 12 minutes, maybe less, they would break through. He had made a final decision hours ago. If they reached the inner bunker where the colonists were sheltering, he would still the secondary charges that had been built into the station structure. He would bring the rocks down and bury everyone and colonists together. It was a grim choice, but it was the only choice that prevented them from taking 5,000 captive. His hand moved toward the control panel. The charges were armed. One command and it would be finished. Then something changed on the sensors. New signals appeared on the scope. They came from nowhere, blinking into existence where there had been empty space moments before. For a moment, thought they had brought reinforcements. Then he saw the designation. The signals carried the marking of the Earth Defense Force. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and controlled, carrying an accent that meant it came from North America. An admiral. She told to keep his people alive. She told him that Earth had heard his call. She told him that Earth was coming. His hands started shaking. He looked at and he saw tears running down her face. The first escape pod was already launching from the cutting tool. The door would hold another minute, maybe two. Through the viewport, saw something that made him want to laugh and cry at the same time. The sky was changing. The cold darkness of space was being filled with light and fire and the unmistakable shape of human warships descending through the atmosphere. They had come. Against every expectation, against every calculation of distance and time, Earth had sent its warriors, and they were bringing everything they had. Down in the deepest bunkers, 5,000 colonists heard the broadcast. They heard that help had arrived. For the first time in 3 weeks, people who had believed they would die in the dark began to hope. They began to believe that they might see their homes again. They began to believe that Earth had not forgotten them after all. Watched the first Earth fighter pass overhead, then another, then dozens like bright birds descending from heaven itself. The still held the upper sections. The battle was far from finished, but the impossible had happened. Help had come from across the stars, and with it came something that could not be measured in weapons or ships or distance. It brought hope. Commander David stood in the observation room and watched the fire rain down from the sky. They had taken the upper levels of station, and now their ground forces were working through the corridors toward the bunkers. He could hear the explosions through the metal floor. Each one was closer than the last. Each one meant that the defensive lines had fallen back another 100 meters. At the rate they were going, the outer bunker door would not hold for more than 30 minutes. The soldiers under his command had done everything right. They had set up defensive positions in the corridors. They had used the narrow passages and tight spaces to make every meter of ground costly for them. But the humans had only 20 trained soldiers to defend against an invading force of hundreds. The mathematics of the situation were impossible. David was a soldier, and soldiers understood that sometimes orders led to death. He had prepared his mind for that reality. He had prepared his heart. What he had not prepared for was the sudden transformation in the situation. The explosions from above stopped. For the first time in 3 weeks, the constant bombardment ceased. The silence was so complete that it seemed to press down on everyone in the bunker. The soldiers looked at each other, confused and afraid. Fear was often the correct response when something unexpected happened. But this fear lasted only a moment. Then the communication system crackled with a voice. Admiral. She was telling David to hold the position. She was telling him that Earth Defense Force ships were engaging the fleet. She was telling him to buy time. Time? That was the only thing that mattered now. If they could hold for hours, if they could keep the contained in the upper sections, then the battle overhead might resolve itself in Earth's favor. If the battle went wrong, it would not matter how long they held. They would eventually break through, and everyone in the bunker would die. But while the battle was happening, while there was still a chance, David and his soldiers would fight. The explosion started again, but they were different now. They were no longer using their heavy bombardment weapons. The sounds coming from above were of combat. Bright flashes lit up the viewports when the reinforced windows faced outward. David could see beams of energy cutting through the darkness. He could see ships moving, ships and human ships, dancing through the sky in a battle that would determine whether 5,000 people lived or died. One of the soldiers, a young man named Gregory who had only finished his military training 2 years ago, asked if Earth could really win. David did not know. They were strong. They had conquered the upper levels without any real difficulty. They had been invincible until the moment Earth's ships arrived. But David had learned something in those moments when the broadcasts came through. Earth had not sent a small force. It had sent everything. Multiple carrier ships, destroyers, fighters, support vessels. The entire Earth Defense Force seemed to have mobilized to answer the colony's call. That kind of commitment meant something. It meant that Earth's leaders had decided that 5,000 colonists were worth any cost. It meant that humans valued their own people. David had grown up hearing that kind of talk, but he had never expected to see it proven in such a dramatic way. The young soldier, Gregory, went back to his position at the barricade. He checked his weapon. He looked through the sight at the door that led to the upper corridors. If they broke through, he would be one of the first to engage them. He was afraid. That was evident in the way his hands shook. But he was also ready. He was also proud to be part of something larger than himself. Above them, the battle raged with terrible intensity. They had not expected the Earth forces to be this strong. They had not anticipated fighters that moved with such precision or weapon systems that could penetrate their defenses. The ships were being damaged, some of them critically. The human pilots pushed hard, pressing every advantage, accepting risks that would have seemed suicidal against any other opponent. David received a new communication from Admiral. She told him to prepare to move the colonists. The upper sections would soon be cleared of presence. The bunkers would be safe. The colony would survive. Those words seemed impossible, but David had learned to believe in impossible things. He ordered the soldiers to prepare to open the bunker levels. He had broadcast a message to all the colonists. They would soon be able to move to the upper levels. They would soon be able to see the sky again. Earth's military would secure the area and provide protection. When the broadcast went out, the response was immediate. Down in the deepest bunker levels, 5,000 people who had given themselves up for dead suddenly understood that they might live. They might actually see their families again. They might actually survive this ordeal. The sounds from above changed. The explosions became less frequent. The energy discharges that lit up the viewports seemed to be moving away from the station. David checked his instruments and saw that the combat forces in the upper sections were retreating. They were pulling back, moving toward the landing zones where their ground troops could be extracted. The battle in the sky was clearly going wrong for them. David gave the order to advance. The soldiers moved up through the corridors carefully, ready for any resistance, but they found almost none. The remaining forces were focused on the evacuation. They were pulling out of the station, loading their ground troops onto transport ships, preparing for a full retreat. When David reached the upper observation room, he could see it with his own eyes. The warships were accelerating away from station. The Earth Defense Force ships were pursuing them, their weapons still hot, ready for one final engagement if the turn to make a stand. But they did not turn. They did not make a stand. They simply ran, understanding that they had met something they could not defeat. David stood at the viewport and watched the ships disappear into the darkness. He felt something break inside his chest. Not pain, but release. All the tension that he had carried for 3 weeks, all the certainty of his own death, all the fear for the lives of the people under his command. It all broke open, and for a moment David could not breathe. Around him, the soldiers began to cheer. They shouted and cried and embraced each other. They had survived. They had held the line long enough for Earth to come. They had lived. Ran into the room, and when she saw David, she embraced him hard. Through her tears, she told him that the bunkers were opening. The colonists were already beginning to move upward. They wanted to see the sky. They wanted to see the Earth ships. They wanted to understand how they had survived. David looked out at the stars and thought about the decision that some admiral on Earth had made. A decision to commit resources, to take risks, to fight an enemy on behalf of people they had never met. That decision had saved 5,000 lives. That decision had proven something important about what it meant to be human. And David understood that the galaxy would never be quite the same. Captain sat in the cockpit of her fighter and felt the vibrations of the accelerating engines beneath her. The ship was an Earth Defense Force interceptor, sleek and fast, designed for one purpose: to strike at targets that others could not touch. Her call sign was Vanguard 1, which meant she led the fighter squadron into the most dangerous parts of the battle. It was an honor that came with the understanding that some days she might not come back. Had been flying combat missions since she was 23 years old. She had logged over 3,000 flight hours. She had never lost it to hesitation or cowardice or lack of skill. She did not plan to start today. They were strong, but they were also fighting enemies they did not understand. They had never encountered human pilots before. They did not know what humans were capable of when they fought for something that mattered. The battle had been going for 14 minutes. In that time, Squadron had destroyed 43 fighters. She had personally gotten 7. They were fighting back hard, and several human pilots had already been killed. Had seen 2 of them eject before their ships exploded. She had not seen what happened to them after. She tried not to think about it. Right now, she needed to focus on the next target. Vanguard 1, I have a command vessel bearing 270, her weapons officer called out. Distance 500 kilometers, bearing mark. Adjusted her course and increased speed. The command vessel was a large target, probably carrying at least 50. It was also heavily armored and heavily armed. Attacking it directly would be risky. But the intelligence from the Earth Defense Force Command Center indicated that this particular vessel was coordinating the strategy. Destroying it might cause the forces to lose their cohesion. This was a pilot named. He was younger than only 25, but he was good. He had fast reflexes and good instincts. He had already saved life twice during this battle. He came up beside her as they moved toward the command vessel. I see, it said. That is going to be a hot approach. Checked her weapons systems. She had 6 long-range missiles and 200 rounds of armor-piercing ammunition. The command vessel had point defense systems that were already tracking her approach, but the distance was still too great for those systems to be accurate. What would be dangerous was getting close enough to fire the missiles. Vanguard 1, you are clear for approach, the command center called. All other units are providing cover. Saw the description was accurate. Other Earth fighter squadrons were engaging the fighters that were moving to intercept her. The sky around her filled with combat. Ships moved at impossible speeds, firing weapons that lit up the darkness. One human fighter took a hit and went spinning out of control. Saw the pilot eject before the ship exploded. Another fighter was cut down by laser fire from a human interceptor. The violence was constant and terrible and necessary. Pushed her fighter faster. The command vessel was growing larger on her targeting screen. She could see its weapon systems charging for attack. She was at 400 kilometers, too far for the missiles to be certain. She needed to get closer. 3 fighters breaking off from the main formation, warned. They are moving to intercept us. Let them come, said. She kept her course straight toward the command vessel. The 3 fighters accelerated toward her. They were trying to force her to break off before she could get to firing range, but had been flying too long to be intimidated by fighters chasing her. She had techniques for this. She had trained for this. yanked her fighter hard to the left at the last possible moment. One of the fighters passed so close that she could see details of its crystalline hull. She fired her cannon, and the rounds ripped through its right wing. The fighter spiraled and exploded. Got one of the others with a perfect missile shot. The third fighter managed to get a burst of energy fire into his shield. It flared bright white, but it held. The damage was minor, kept moving toward the command vessel. 200 kilometers, close enough now, launched her first missile. It streaked across the space between them, moving faster than sound, faster than thought. The command vessel's point defense systems tried to track it, but the missile was too fast, too maneuverable. It hit the vessel's forward section, and a massive explosion bloomed in the darkness. The command vessel shuddered and began to slow. But it was not destroyed. These ships were built with redundant systems. It was still flying, still a threat. Launched a second missile and a third. Launched missiles from his fighter as well. The command vessel was hit repeatedly, explosions rocking its hull, fire streaming from damaged sections. But more fighters were coming to defend it. Saw at least a dozen new signals appearing on her targeting screen. She had maybe 30 seconds before they reached her position. She launched her last two missiles, then turned her fighter hard and ran. The missiles hit the command vessel one more time. This strike was more serious. Watched on her instruments as the ship's power systems started to fail. The engines shut down. The defensive weapons went silent. The massive vessel went dark and started to drift. Its display went crazy with alarms. The incoming fighters were close now, too close for missiles to be effective. She would have to use her cannon. She banked hard and came around to face the approaching fighters. Was right beside her, weapons charged, ready to fight. What happened next was pure combat flying, and moved through the formation of fighters, firing their cannons, dodging incoming energy fire, making hard turns that pushed the limits of their ships. One fighter got close and fired a burst of energy that caught its right engine. The ship vibrated hard, and warning lights came on. Didn't think about it, she just reacted. She fired her cannon at the fighter and watched it explode. She pushed her damaged fighter harder, ignoring the warnings. There was a battle to win. There were people on station who were counting on her to do her job. 20 minutes later, the surviving fighters began to retreat. They moved back toward their main fleet, and then the rest of Vanguard's squadron gave chase, their weapons hot, their pilots exhausted and alive. Behind them, the destroyed command vessel drifted through space like a monument to human determination. Brought her fighter back toward the Earth carrier for landing. As she descended through the atmosphere, she looked down at station. They were pulling out. Their remaining ships were accelerating away. The battle was ending. Humanity had won. Felt something break open in her chest, but it was not pain. It was relief. It was the knowledge that the people on that station would live. It was the understanding that her flying, her skill, her willingness to take risks had mattered, had saved lives. She brought her fighter down on the landing strip of the Earth carrier. As she climbed out of the cockpit, she could see the ground crew celebrating. The pilots coming back, the living ones at least, had proven that Earth was strong. They had proven that humans could fight and win against enemies that seemed impossible to defeat. Walked across the landing deck and thought about the next battle. There would be others. There would always be others. But today she had given people hope. Today she had proven that Earth did not abandon its own. The message from the Council arrived 2 hours after the retreated. It came through official galactic channels, marked with the highest priority codes. The Council was demanding an explanation. How had a species they had rated as barely developed managed to commit such military resources across interstellar distances? How had humans achieved something that the established powers had said was impossible? Admiral read the message twice, then set it aside. She was standing in the command center aboard her flagship, looking at tactical displays that showed the retreating fleet and the pursuit patterns of Earth's remaining fighters. The battle had cost her 12 ships. 27 fighters had been lost. 314 of her people would never return home. Those were acceptable losses. They had prevented 5,000 colonists from being taken captive or killed. They had defeated an invading force that the Council had said Earth was not strong enough to face. They had proven something important about what it meant to be human. Did not bother responding to the Council's questions. Instead, she ordered her communications officer to broadcast the entire battle record across all known frequencies. Let everyone see what had happened. Let them understand that Earth would not accept the status of a minor power. Let them know that when humanity's people were threatened, Earth would respond with every resource at its disposal. The broadcast was picked up by thousands of species across known space. On trading stations and military bases and political centers, aliens of every description watched the footage. They saw human ships engaging forces. They saw human pilots making decisions that saved lives. They saw human soldiers standing firm against overwhelming odds. And they understood something that had never been clear before. Earth was not a species to be ignored. Earth was not a power to be dismissed. The requests for contact flooded in. Trade stations wanted to establish agreements with Earth. Minor powers wanted to propose defensive alliances. Most significantly, the humans who had been scattered across the galaxy, living in small colonies and outposts, suddenly understood that their species would fight for them. That being human meant being part of something that would not let you fall. One message came from a colony on the planet Helios 7. The message was from Dr. Thomas, a scientist who had been living far from Earth for 10 years. He said that the people on his colony had seen the broadcast. They said that they had cried when they saw Earth's ships arriving at station. They had understood that if they were ever threatened, Earth would come for them too. That understanding changed everything. Another message came from the human trading post on Valiant Station. The traders there said that business had already increased by 30%. Species that had previously treated human traders as minor players were now making real offers. The respect had changed. The calculation had changed. Admiral forwarded these messages to Earth's government. She told them that the response across the galaxy was stronger than anyone had predicted. She told them that humanity's willingness to commit resources to save its own people had fundamentally altered how other species viewed Earth. The Council sent a formal diplomatic delegation. They arrived at station 3 weeks after the battle had ended. The delegation was led by Chancellor, a being made of living crystal, thousands of years old, with the weight of ancient authority in every movement. She stood in the rebuilt command center and looked at the repairs still being made to the station's structure. Chancellor said that the Council had made errors in judgment. She admitted that the Council had underestimated humanity. She spoke of reports received from survivors about human tactics and human determination. She mentioned that they had never fought an enemy willing to absorb such losses to achieve objectives. They had never encountered a species that treated each individual life as valuable enough to warrant extreme risks. Admiral stood and listened. When the Chancellor finished speaking, gave her response. She said that Earth harbored no ill will toward the established powers. Earth wanted to be a good neighbor and a reliable trading partner, but Earth would not accept a secondary status in matters affecting human citizens. Earth would not remain silent while its people were dismissed. And Earth would continue to develop its military capabilities to ensure that no species, no matter how ancient or powerful, could treat human lives as expendable. The message was clear to everyone listening. Earth was claiming its seat at the galactic table, not through conquest or territorial ambition, but through demonstrated capability and unwavering commitment to its own people. Chancellor acknowledged the statement. She told Admiral that the Council would formally recognize Earth as a major power in its region. She offered to negotiate a defensive pact that would bind the Council's forces to Earth's defense if humanity was ever threatened. She proposed a trade agreement that would give humans access to advanced technology previously restricted to established powers. accepted the pact and the trade agreement. But she made one thing clear. Earth would not accept special treatment. Earth would not accept charity. Whatever technology Earth received, humans would develop their own equivalents. Whatever protection Earth gained, humans would provide their own defense. The pact was a partnership between equals, not a patron offering scraps to an inferior power. Down on station, the colonists heard about the negotiations. They heard that Earth had claimed its place among the great powers of the galaxy. They understood that the colony would be rebuilt, not just as a settlement, but as a symbol of human power and human commitment. The funeral services for those who had died during the battle were held in the main colony square. 314 soldiers who had given their lives, 567 colonists who had not survived the initial attack. The ceremony was simple and direct. The priest spoke the words that had been passed down through human history since ancient times. They gave their lives so that others might live. They would not be forgotten. They had died defending their home and their people. When the ceremony ended, there was a moment of silence. No one spoke. No one moved. The weight of loss and sacrifice hung in the air, but underneath that weight was something else. Gratitude, pride, the knowledge that the lives that had been given had meant something, had changed something. Captain stood with her pilots at the edge of the gathering. She had flown more combat missions in the past 3 weeks than in her entire previous career. She had seen friends die. She had seen moments of terrible beauty and terrible cost, and she would do it all again if it meant that colonists like these could live. Several of the colonists came up to the pilots and thanked them. They embraced the fighters who had saved their lives. Some of them cried. Some of them wanted to know the names of the pilots they saw on the broadcast, the ones who had made the runs that turned the battle. Gave her name to a woman who asked. The woman held her hand and told her that she had a daughter who wanted to join the military when she was old enough, that the daughter had watched the broadcast and understood what humans could do, that seeing what and the other pilots had accomplished had changed how she thought about the future. Felt something catch in her throat. That was why they had fought. That was why they had accepted the risks, because somewhere a young girl was watching, understanding that humans could achieve the impossible when it mattered, understanding that Earth would come when its people were in danger, understanding what it meant to be human. The sun set over station, casting long shadows across the buildings being rebuilt. They were gone. The danger had passed, and Earth had proven something that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity did not abandon its own. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy would never be quite the same. 6 months had passed since the last warship disappeared beyond the system. Station had been rebuilt. New structures stood where old ones had been destroyed. The domes had been repaired and replanted with food crops. The mining operations had resumed. People had returned to building their lives and their families. But something fundamental had changed in the colony. People worked harder because they understood the fragility of what they had built. They worked with purpose because they knew that their lives mattered, that Earth cared about them, that Earth would not let them fall. Captain stood on the observation deck and watched as a new transport ship arrived from Earth. This ship was full of colonists, young people, families, engineers, scientists, all willing to venture across the galaxy because they understood that Earth would protect them. The colony that had been struggling to survive was now growing. Station was becoming important again. The second transport arrived a week later, then a third. The population of the colony began to increase. Earth's government had made a commitment to strengthen human presence throughout the galaxy. Station was the first test of that commitment. Admiral stood in the conference room aboard her flagship and faced the representatives of 7 different galactic powers. They had come to observe the aftermath of the incident. They had come to understand how a young species had achieved something that the established powers had not expected. They had come to negotiate with a species that had proven it would fight for its own people. The council sent Chancellor again. She spoke carefully about the future relationship between Earth and the established powers. She offered defensive pacts and trade agreements and technology transfers. She offered recognition and respect and a seat at the great tables of galactic government. But Admiral had learned something important in the months since the battle. Earth did not need to bow before the established powers. Earth had proven that humans were strong, that humans were capable, that humans would fight harder than any other species when defending their people. So when the Chancellor made her offers, made counteroffers, Earth would accept the defensive pact only if it was truly mutual. Earth would not receive technology as charity but would trade for it as equals. Earth would take a seat at the great tables of galactic government, and that seat would be negotiated with the understanding that Earth was a major power, not a minor one. The Chancellor was silent for a long moment. Then she said that she understood. The Council would agree to Earth's terms. The Council had learned, she said, that age and experience did not always predict capability, that there were qualities that young species possessed that older ones had sometimes lost. What qualities? Asked. Chancellor took a long time to answer. Finally, she said, the willingness to sacrifice for your people, the determination to protect your own at any cost, the refusal to accept that anyone should be left behind. These were human qualities. These were qualities that Earth had proven beyond any doubt. The other representatives in the conference room seemed to understand what the Chancellor was saying. It was true. Humans had done something that the older species had largely abandoned. They had acted as if the lives of their people actually mattered. They had mobilized vast resources for a single colony. They had fought against terrible odds because it was the right thing to do. The negotiations lasted 3 weeks. At the end, Earth had secured trade agreements with 6 different galactic powers. Earth had established defensive pacts with 4 of them. Earth had gained access to technology that would accelerate human development by decades. Most importantly, Earth had secured recognition as a major power in its region. But the victory that mattered most was not written in treaties or trade agreements. It was the simple fact that humans across the galaxy understood something they had not known before. Earth was strong. Earth was coming. Earth would not abandon its own. On station, the survivors of the initial attack began to rebuild their lives. Some of them had experienced such trauma that they needed medical care and counseling. The Earth Defense Force provided that care. Some of them had lost family members in the initial bombardment. Those people found community and support from the new colonists arriving from Earth. Worked in the communications center again. She had her husband and her 2 children with her. The colony had decided that all immediate family members of colonists would be brought to station if they wanted to come. The official reason was to strengthen the population. The real reason was to allow families to be together, to not be separated by the vast distances of space. Commander David received a promotion. He was made the commander of all military forces at station. His job now was to oversee the security of the colony and train new soldiers who would arrive in the coming months. The Earth Defense Force was planning to establish a major military base at station. The colony would become an important strategic position in the defense of human space. Was offered a position in the Earth Defense Force Academy. They wanted her to teach the next generation of pilots how to fly combat missions, how to accept risks, how to fight for something that mattered, thought about it carefully, then accepted. She decided she would split her time between teaching and flying. She would maintain her edge as a pilot, but she would pass her knowledge on to the next generation. The farewell ceremony for the military units that were being rotated home took place on a clear day. The sun was bright, and there was a cool wind blowing across the colony. Thousands of people came to watch. They wanted to thank the soldiers who had saved their lives. They wanted to make sure the soldiers understood that their sacrifice had meant something. Stood with the other pilots. A little girl came up to her. It was the same girl whose mother had spoken to at the funeral ceremony. The girl had a drawing that she had made. It showed a fighter pilot sitting in a cockpit with stars all around. The girl gave the drawing to and told her that when she was old enough, she wanted to be a pilot too. She wanted to protect people just like had done. Held the drawing and felt tears start to form. She told the girl that was a wonderful dream. She told her that Earth would need pilots like that, pilots who understood why they were fighting, pilots who understood that lives depended on their skills and their courage. As the military ships lifted off and began their journey back toward Earth, the colonists watched from the ground. They watched their protectors leave, knowing that other protectors would come, knowing that Earth would never leave them undefended. Captain stood on the observation deck one final time. He looked at the colony that had been destroyed and rebuilt. He thought about the people who had died. He thought about the people who had survived. He thought about what it meant to be human, to be part of a species that had proven it would cross the galaxy to save its own, that would commit resources and risk lives because it mattered. The galaxy was changing. The old certainties were being challenged. The assumption that the young species would simply accept their place in the hierarchy was proving to be wrong. Humans had claimed their power. Humans had claimed their place. And they had done it not through conquest or greed, but through the simple act of refusing to abandon their own people. In the coming years, other species would watch humans carefully. They would try to understand what had happened at Station and why it had changed everything. They would come to understand that Earth was not just another species that would fade into obscurity. Earth was a force that cared about its people, a force that would fight for them. And gradually, some of the older species would remember something they had lost long ago. The understanding that the measure of a civilization was not how powerful it was. The measure of a civilization was how willing it was to sacrifice for its own people. Humanity had proven it had that measure in abundance. The sun set over Station. The colony lights came on, and life continued. Not the frightened, desperate life of those first 3 weeks, but a life full of hope and purpose. A life where people understood that they were not forgotten, that they were valued, that somewhere among the stars Earth was watching, Earth was strong, and Earth would come when they needed it.